Just weeks ago, Patrick Mahomes questioned the hype around rising quarterback Shedeur Sanders. At the time, it sounded like normal veteran confidence. But then a massive global deal surfaced, and suddenly that old clip went viral again, raising one uncomfortable question across the NFL world. Did Mahomes underestimate him? Eyes American. It all started with a moment that didn't seem like a big deal at first. During a routine media session, reporters asked Patrick Mahomes about the new wave of young quarterbacks entering the league. Names were being thrown around, expectations were high, and naturally the conversation drifted toward one of the most talked about prospects in football, Shedeur Sanders. Mahomes responded the way many veterans often do when asked about rising stars. Calm, measured, confident. He talked about how the NFL ultimately rewards proven performance, not hype. He emphasized that the league has a way of separating real production from early excitement. And while he never directly attacked Sanders, the tone of his answer immediately caught attention. Mahomes mentioned that young players often arrive with huge expectations, massive media attention, and big brands behind them. But according to him, none of that truly matters until a quarterback proves it on the field at the NFL level. His message was simple: talent is one thing, but respect in this league is earned through results. On the surface, it sounded like a typical veteran response. The kind of comment you hear every offseason when experienced stars are asked about the next generation, but the timing made the moment feel different. At that point, Sanders had already built a massive following. His college career had drawn huge television audiences, his leadership had been widely discussed by analysts, and his name carried weight well beyond the football field. Many fans already believed he represented the future of the quarterback position. So when Mahomes framed the conversation around proving it first, some viewers felt the comment was aimed directly at Sanders' rising reputation. Social media reacted instantly. Clips of the interview began circulating within minutes. Fans debated what Mahomes really meant. Some argued he was simply defending the traditional standard of the league, performance first, hype second. Others believed the comment subtly downplayed the momentum Sanders had already built. Analysts joined the discussion as well. A few said Mahomes was protecting the competitive hierarchy of the league. Others suggested it might have been a veteran sending a quiet message to the next generation: respect must be earned. But what made this moment interesting wasn't just the comment itself. It was the fact that the internet never forgets. The clip didn't disappear after a day or two like most interviews do. Instead, fans saved it, reposted it, and quietly archived it. Not because it was explosive at the time, but because many suspected the conversation around Sanders was far from finished. And as it turns out, they were right. Because what happened next would bring that exact clip back into the spotlight, and suddenly the entire football world started looking at Mahomes' words in a very different way. But that's when the story took a turn nobody expected. Long before the comments from Patrick Mahomes started circulating online, Shedeur Sanders had already become one of the most talked about names in football, and not just because of his play on the field. Part of the attention came from his unique path to the spotlight. As the son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, Shedeur entered the football world with a level of visibility most young quarterbacks never experience. From the moment he stepped onto the college stage, cameras were already watching. Every throw, every interview, every performance carried extra attention. That exposure only grew when he played under his father's leadership at Jackson State Tigers football before later becoming the starting quarterback for the Colorado Buffaloes football. The move to Colorado instantly turned the program into one of the most discussed teams in college football. Television ratings spiked. Social media engagement exploded. Suddenly, games that once flew under the radar were drawing national attention. For many fans, Shedeur represented something exciting: a confident young quarterback with strong leadership, sharp accuracy, and a natural understanding of the spotlight. Supporters pointed to his poise in big moments and his ability to handle pressure that would overwhelm most players his age. But not everyone saw it the same way. Critics began questioning whether the massive attention surrounding him was fully earned yet. Some analysts argued that the spotlight came as much from the Sanders name as it did from on-field production. Others wondered whether the hype was moving faster than the results. Those debates quickly turned Shedeur into one of the most polarizing figures in the sport. On one side were fans who believed he was clearly a future franchise quarterback. They pointed to his composure in tight games, his ability to read defenses, and the leadership he showed in rebuilding struggling programs. On the other side were skeptics who believed the narrative around him had grown too quickly. They questioned whether the media attention, endorsement interest, and national coverage were arriving before he had fully proven himself at the professional level. That divide created the perfect environment for controversy. Every big performance fueled supporters who believed his rise was justified. Every tough game gave critics new talking points. And because of the massive media spotlight surrounding the Sanders family, every moment was amplified far beyond what most college quarterbacks experience. In other words, Shedeur Sanders wasn't just another prospect entering the football conversation. He had already become a symbol of a bigger debate in the sport, the clash between traditional football culture and a new era where branding, personality, and global attention play a much larger role in an athlete's career. And that's exactly why Mahomes' earlier comments suddenly carried much more weight once fans started revisiting them. Because this story was never just about one interview. It was about what happens when an established superstar and a rising phenomenon suddenly find themselves at the center of the same conversation. And that conversation was only getting louder. Then came the moment that completely changed the conversation. Because just when the debate around Shedeur Sanders seemed stuck between hype and skepticism, reports began circulating about a partnership that nobody saw coming. And within hours, the entire football world was scrambling to understand just how big it really was. The headlines centered on the powerful Saudi investment entity known as the Public Investment Fund, often referred to simply as PIF. This is the same fund that has poured enormous money into global sports projects, including the takeover of Newcastle United FC and the creation of LIV Golf. So when rumors began suggesting that Shedeur Sanders had become part of their next major sports initiative, analysts immediately paid attention. At first, many people assumed it was just another athlete endorsement, maybe a sponsorship deal, maybe a brand partnership tied to international marketing. But as more details started leaking out, it became clear this situation was very different. Reports claimed the partnership was structured as a long-term business relationship connected to the global expansion of American football. Instead of simply promoting a product or appearing in commercials, Shedeur was reportedly positioned as a central figure in a larger strategy to grow the sport internationally. In other words, this wasn't just a marketing contract. It was being framed as a strategic investment. And that distinction is what made the headlines explode. Because if the reports were accurate and several sports business insiders suggested the numbers were enormous, the deal instantly placed Shedeur Sanders among the most commercially valuable young athletes in football. For many observers, the timing made the situation even more fascinating. Just weeks earlier, debates about Shedeur had centered on whether he still needed to prove it at the highest level. Critics questioned whether the hype surrounding him had grown too quickly. Now suddenly, one of the most powerful financial forces in global sports appeared to be betting on his long-term value. That shift triggered a wave of reactions across the NFL world. Fans started revisiting earlier conversations about Shedeur's potential. Analysts began discussing the growing intersection between sports performance and global branding. And social media exploded with comparisons between established stars and the new generation of quarterbacks entering the spotlight. But there was one clip in particular that kept resurfacing during those discussions. A media interview involving Patrick Mahomes. Because once the partnership headlines started spreading online, fans quickly remembered something Mahomes had said earlier about young quarterbacks needing to prove themselves before the business side takes over. Suddenly, that comment was being replayed everywhere. And that's when this story stopped being just about a business deal. It turned into a full-blown NFL debate. The moment the comments hit the internet, the reaction was instant and brutal. Within minutes, clips of Kia Nurse speaking about the league's growth began circulating across social media. Fans weren't just debating what she said, they were pulling up receipts. On platforms like X and YouTube, users quickly began sharing old interviews, TV segments, and highlight reels that seemed to contradict Nurse's point. Again and again, one name kept appearing in those clips: Caitlin Clark. Fans posted sold-out arena footage, TV ratings charts, and news headlines showing how attendance and viewership surged during Clark's college run at University of Iowa and continued once she entered the WNBA. The numbers were hard to ignore. Broadcast ratings for games involving Clark consistently broke records. Merchandise sales skyrocketed. Ticket demand exploded in multiple cities whenever her team came to town. Even neutral fans, people who had never watched a WNBA game before, suddenly found themselves tuning in. And that's exactly why Nurse's comments triggered such a strong reaction. For many fans, the argument wasn't that Clark built women's basketball alone. Plenty of stars have contributed to the league's history, but viewers online felt that refusing to acknowledge the massive impact Clark had on the sport's recent popularity was simply ignoring reality. Comment sections filled up quickly. Some fans defended Nurse, arguing that the league's growth has been a collective effort built over decades by players who fought for visibility long before Clark arrived. But others pushed back hard. They pointed out that while the foundation of the league was built by previous generations, the recent explosion in attention clearly coincided with Clark's rise to superstardom. Highlight videos comparing pre-Clark attendance numbers to the current surge began spreading rapidly. Even sports analysts started weighing in. Several commentators explained that sports leagues often experience breakthrough moments when one transcendent player captures the public's imagination. In the past, players like Michael Jordan did it for the NBA. Now, many believe Clark has done something similar, at least in terms of drawing new eyes to women's basketball. That comparison alone fueled even more debate. Critics of Nurse argued that acknowledging Clark's influence doesn't diminish the accomplishments of other players. Instead, they say it highlights how one star can elevate an entire league. But supporters of Nurse warned that focusing too heavily on one player risks overshadowing the contributions of the many athletes who have carried the sport for years. As the debate raged on, one thing became clear: the conversation had moved far beyond a simple comment. It had turned into a full-scale internet showdown about recognition, respect, and who truly deserves credit for the WNBA's surge in popularity. And the internet wasn't finished yet. Because as more clips, statistics, and fan reactions continued to surface, the pressure surrounding this debate only kept growing. What started as one opinion was now spiraling into a much bigger controversy, one that had the entire women's basketball community watching closely. Inside a professional locker room, moments like this are rarely ignored. In fact, situations where a player publicly challenges a narrative or calls out another player's performance often become instant talking points among teammates and veterans around the league. That's especially true in the hyper-competitive world of the NFL. Players in the NFL operate in an environment where confidence, reputation, and perception all carry serious weight. Every statement made publicly, whether in a press conference, interview, or social media post, can ripple through the locker room culture in ways fans on the outside might not immediately understand. Veteran players often describe the locker room as a place where honesty is valued, but respect is mandatory. When one player openly critiques another player's performance, reactions can be mixed. Some teammates respect the blunt honesty. Others see it as unnecessary drama that could create distractions during a season that already demands intense focus. In many cases, the way players respond depends on how the criticism is delivered. If the comments are viewed as competitive motivation, something meant to push players to perform better, then the locker room can rally around it. Football culture has always embraced tough talk when it's paired with accountability and results on the field. But when comments are perceived as personal attacks or attempts to shift blame, the dynamic changes quickly. Veteran leaders in NFL locker rooms tend to step in during those moments. Their job isn't just to perform on Sundays, it's also to maintain stability within the team environment. Experienced players understand that media-driven narratives can spiral fast if they're not addressed internally. Many former players have talked about how the locker room acts almost like its own ecosystem. Issues are usually handled behind closed doors first. Teammates talk directly, captains address tensions, coaches sometimes intervene if a situation risks affecting team chemistry. The goal is always the same: keep the focus on winning games. But in the modern sports media era, that's becoming harder than ever. With 24/7 sports coverage, podcasts, and social media clips spreading within seconds, even a single comment can explode into a national debate overnight. What might have once stayed inside team walls now becomes headline material across the entire sports world. That's something many current players are very aware of. Several former NFL stars, including legends like Tom Brady, have often spoken about the importance of protecting locker room unity. For teams competing at the highest level, internal trust can be just as important as talent on the field. When players believe their teammates have their backs, it strengthens the entire roster. When that trust cracks, even slightly, it can create tension that opponents are quick to exploit. That's why moments like this often spark such intense debate among fans and analysts. It's not just about one comment or one disagreement. It's about what those comments represent inside the high-pressure environment of professional football. Is it competitive fire? Is it frustration boiling over? Or is it the beginning of something bigger that could divide a team? Only the players inside the locker room truly know the answer. But history in the NFL shows one clear pattern: the strongest teams are usually the ones that settle their differences internally and emerge more united than before. Because in a league as demanding as the NFL, championships are rarely won by talent alone. They're won by teams that manage to keep the locker room stronger than the noise outside it. When the conversation started gaining traction, many fans began asking the same question: what did Patrick Mahomes think about all of this? After all, Mahomes isn't just another quarterback in the league. As the face of the Kansas City Chiefs and one of the most recognizable stars in the NFL, anything he says or doesn't say carries weight. And when reporters finally asked him about the situation, his response immediately caught people's attention. Mahomes didn't escalate the drama, he didn't fire back, and he certainly didn't add fuel to the growing debate that was already spreading across sports media. Instead, he handled it with the kind of calm, controlled tone that has become a trademark of his leadership style. He acknowledged that conversations and opinions are part of football. Players talk, analysts debate, fans react. That's simply the nature of the league. But Mahomes made it clear that his focus stays in one place: winning games and supporting his team. It was a response that sounded simple on the surface, but many observers believe it carried a deeper message. Mahomes has spent years building a reputation not just as an elite quarterback, but as a steady presence inside the locker room. Teammates often describe him as someone who avoids unnecessary distractions and keeps the team focused on the bigger picture. So when he declined to dive into the controversy, some fans saw that as intentional. Instead of turning the moment into a personal back and forth, he subtly shifted the conversation back toward football. And that approach raised an interesting question. Was Mahomes simply staying professional, or was he quietly sending a message about how these situations should be handled? Around the league, quarterbacks often find themselves pulled into public debates they didn't start. Comments from former players, analysts, or other athletes can suddenly become headline news, forcing them to respond whether they want to or not. Some players choose to push back aggressively. Others take a more measured approach. Mahomes clearly chose the second option. But that doesn't mean his response went unnoticed. In fact, several analysts pointed out that the way he handled the situation may have reinforced why so many people view him as one of the league's most respected leaders. Leadership in the NFL isn't only about throwing touchdowns or winning championships. It's also about navigating moments like this when outside noise starts creeping into the conversation. The best quarterbacks understand that every reaction becomes part of the story. And Mahomes has learned how quickly narratives can spiral. Over the years, he's been praised, criticized, analyzed, and debated more than almost any player in football. From contract discussions to playoff performances, every move he makes becomes a national topic. Because of that, he's developed a careful balance. Speak when it matters, stay quiet when the conversation doesn't help the team. That strategy may not always generate viral headlines, but it often earns respect inside the league. And that's exactly what seemed to happen here. While fans and commentators continued debating the situation online, Mahomes remained focused on preparation, teammates, and the upcoming challenges of the season. To him, the bigger picture never changed. Football games are still decided on the field, not in interviews, social media clips, or viral debates. But even so, the conversation surrounding the situation didn't completely disappear. If anything, Mahomes' calm response added another layer to it. Some fans admired the restraint, others wondered if there was more being left unsaid. And in today's NFL media environment, silence can sometimes be just as powerful as a bold statement. Because when a superstar quarterback chooses his words carefully, people tend to read between the lines. And that's exactly what happened here. What made this entire situation even more interesting wasn't just the moment itself, it was what it revealed about the changing culture of the NFL. Because moments like this are becoming more common across the league. In today's NFL, the conversation around players, respect, leadership, and influence is evolving faster than ever. Veterans, rookies, analysts, and fans are all part of a massive media ecosystem that reacts to every comment, every interview, and every viral clip. And sometimes, a single moment can expose a much bigger shift happening behind the scenes. For decades, the NFL operated under a very clear hierarchy. Veterans commanded respect, rookies stayed quiet, and most disagreements happened privately inside locker rooms far away from cameras and microphones. But that dynamic has started to change. Social media, 24-hour sports coverage, and podcast culture have transformed how players communicate with the public. Today, athletes speak directly to fans, share opinions openly, and respond to narratives almost instantly. And that new level of visibility can create tension. When a comment sparks debate, it doesn't stay inside a locker room anymore. It spreads across sports shows, Twitter threads, YouTube channels, and fan forums within hours. That's exactly why situations involving high-profile players like Patrick Mahomes often turn into national talking points. Mahomes represents the modern NFL superstar, talented, influential, and constantly under the spotlight. Every comment tied to his name becomes part of a larger conversation about leadership, expectations, and respect inside the league. But this shift isn't only about star quarterbacks. Across the NFL, younger players are entering the league with massive college followings, nil deals, and personal brands already established before their first professional snap. They're confident, media-savvy, and far more comfortable speaking publicly than previous generations. And sometimes, that confidence can challenge traditional expectations. Veteran players grew up in a different football culture, one where earning respect took years, not months. So when younger players arrive with instant attention and influence, it can create subtle friction between generations. Some fans believe that tension is healthy. They argue that the league is simply evolving. New voices are entering the conversation, and players are no longer expected to stay silent when controversial topics arise. Others believe something important is being lost. They feel the old-school structure of the NFL helped maintain discipline, accountability, and unity inside teams. When debates play out publicly, it can sometimes blur the line between competition and distraction. And that's where situations like this become symbolic. It's not just about one comment or one interview, it becomes a reflection of how football culture itself is changing. The modern NFL is louder, faster, and more connected than ever before. Every opinion can spark a headline. Every reaction can become a viral clip. And every controversy can fuel days of discussion across sports media. But there's another layer to this shift that often goes unnoticed. The league itself has become more aware of its global audience. Millions of fans now follow the NFL from outside the United States, watching highlights, interviews, and debates through digital platforms. That means every moment, good or bad, reaches a much larger audience than it did even 10 years ago. Players understand that. Coaches understand that. And teams are learning how quickly narratives can grow once they leave the locker room. Which brings the conversation back to leadership. How do star players respond when debates like this begin circulating? Do they confront it directly? Do they ignore it? Or do they take the kind of careful approach we saw from Mahomes? Different players choose different strategies, but one thing is clear: navigating public narratives has become part of the job description for modern NFL stars. Football is still about performance on Sundays, but the story around the game now lives every day of the week. And that's why moments like this resonate beyond a single interview or comment. They highlight a league that's constantly evolving, where tradition and modern influence are sometimes moving in different directions. The real question is whether these moments will continue to happen. Because they will. The bigger question is how players, teams, and the league itself will adapt to a football world where every conversation can instantly become part of the national spotlight. In the end, this situation turned into much more than just a quick sports headline. What started as a simple comment or reaction slowly grew into a debate that spread across the entire football world. Fans argued about it, analysts broke it down on television, social media exploded with opinions from every direction, and suddenly one moment became part of a much larger conversation about respect, leadership, and the changing culture of the NFL. At the center of it all was Patrick Mahomes. For years, Mahomes has been viewed as one of the league's most respected leaders. His performance, consistency, and ability to stay calm under pressure have helped define an era of modern football. That's why moments involving him tend to carry extra weight. When something even slightly controversial surfaces around a player of his stature, the reaction becomes immediate. Some fans quickly defended him, arguing that situations like this are often blown out of proportion by media narratives. In their view, Mahomes has consistently handled pressure with professionalism and focus. They believe the conversation surrounding the moment says more about today's media environment than it does about the player himself. Others saw the situation differently. Some fans believe that moments like this reveal deeper tensions that exist within the league, tensions between rising stars and established veterans, between traditional football culture and the modern, media-driven version of the sport. According to this perspective, even small comments can hint at bigger shifts happening behind the scenes. Of course, it's important to remember that much of the discussion remains speculative. Rumors suggest different interpretations of what happened and what certain reactions may have meant. Reports claim some insiders see it as a simple misunderstanding, while others believe it reflects growing pressure around high-profile players. But without direct confirmation from those involved, much of that conversation remains just that, conversation. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps debates like this alive. In today's sports world, narratives move incredibly fast. A single clip can circulate online within minutes, reaching millions of viewers before the full context is even understood. Fans begin forming opinions instantly. Analysts react, commentators debate, and by the time the dust settles, the moment has already taken on a life of its own. That's the reality of the modern NFL. The game is no longer just about what happens on the field. It's also about perception, storytelling, and the non-stop conversation that surrounds the league throughout the year. Every comment, every interview, and every interaction has the potential to become part of that larger narrative. But there's another side to this story that often gets overlooked. Players themselves are navigating an environment that is far more intense than it was for previous generations. The spotlight is constant, expectations are enormous. And the margin for public mistakes has become incredibly small. Even a minor comment can spark headlines. Even a simple reaction can trigger days of debate. That pressure is something every modern NFL star must learn to handle. For someone like Mahomes, that challenge is even greater. As one of the league's most recognizable figures, he represents more than just his team. His actions, words, and reactions are constantly analyzed by fans, media members, and critics alike. Yet despite the noise, the most important truth about the NFL hasn't changed. Performance still decides everything. At the end of the day, debates fade, Headlines move on. Social media finds the next controversy. What ultimately matters is what happens when players step back onto the field and compete. And that's why situations like this rarely have a clear final answer. Some fans will always believe the moment revealed something significant. Others will see it as another example of a story that grew far bigger than it ever should have been. Both sides will keep their opinions. Both sides will keep debating. And in a league as passionate and competitive as the NFL, that debate is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. Because in today's football world, the game doesn't end when the clock hits zero. Sometimes that's when the conversation really begins.